Good evening, buonasera, everybody, and welcome to yet another great event in our digital diplomacy series. And you see the hashtag up there on the screen. So we are very happy for today's discussion beyond and Facebook. Now, of course, Twitter and Facebook tools for us diplomats, for ambassadors. I don't see how an ambassador can operate effectively in the 21st century without the social media support and actually active engagement in them. And they are very important, Twitter and Facebook, for all who work in and around international affairs. And on that subject, I invite everybody to follow us on our new Instagram profile, Italy in US. Please do follow us on that. I've said this many times, while preserving its traditional roots and processes, diplomacy is changing, and frankly, is changing very deeply, very profoundly. Technology, innovation have been important factors in the evolution of diplomacy, of course. We need not only to embrace that technology and innovation, but also to really understand their role in what we do and how we relate with all players, traditional players and less traditional ones. And to fully understand the new tools, one must learn from the pros. And TechChange and Nick Martin, our moderator today, have been key in this particular process. Nick is an educator, technologist, and social entrepreneur with over 10 years of international development and peace building experience. He's the founder and CEO of TechChange, a social enterprise based here in DC that builds online courses for people and organizations who want to make a difference in the world. And he's also a professor at Georgetown and GWU. Now we are approaching the moment when it's standing room only, but there are seats available in the room. So I encourage also the newcomers in the room to choose your seat and just make yourself comfortable in the room. So as I was saying, a very distinguished moderator for tonight's event. Thank you so much, Nick, for guiding us through our discussion today. But also, I would like to give a big thanks to our great panelists tonight. As you can see, a great group of panelists to make this discussion lively and informative as it should be. I think they will bring the panelists to our discussion different experiences, perspectives, roles, and most of all, I'm sure, a very strong passion for what you do. I have to apologize because of another engagement. In a few moments, I will have to leave pretty soon, but I have no doubt that this is going to be a very interesting, a very productive debate. I wish you everybody an excellent discussion. Thank you for attending. Grazie to everybody. And Nick, now you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Ambassador, and thank you to the Embassy for hosting tonight. Very excited to be here in the latest session as part of the ongoing digital diplomacy series. Happy to report that this session actually filled up the fastest it ever has, just within a couple hours. So you all are lucky to be here, and we are lucky to have you. Very exciting. My name is Nick. I'm the founder and CEO of TechChange, and we build beautiful courses in technology for social change. Things like data visualization, mapping, all the great topics we'll be exploring today. Now, usually they invite a famous journalist to moderate this panel. I am a modern poetry major. I took Intro to Journalism pass-fail, and I'm not going to tell you what I got in that class. But I will say why this topic. I think Andrea and I, as we were planning the event, decided, you know, there have been a lot of these wonderful sessions focus more on social media, the role of Twitter and Facebook in diplomacy. We wanted to take that conversation deeper and further and really look at interesting and exciting examples in data visualization, in mapping, in e-learning. And that is why we've assembled a phenomenal panel here today. We realize the topic is broad, but I think you'll be excited about the examples we are going to share. In terms of format, I'm going to go ahead and introduce everybody. Then I'm going to let them share a bit more about their backgrounds. Then we're going to hear from each panelist about a project or two that they're particularly excited about, that they're working on. Then I'm going to have you talk to the person next to you for a few minutes, introduce yourself, and also reflect on what sticks out to you. And then open it up for a few questions. And then the most important part, we're going to eat some really good pizza afterwards. So I hope you're excited about that. So a reminder, feel free to tweet your questions to me at NCMart or Italy in US, and use the hashtag digital diplomacy. Also wanted to remind folks that if you would like to get on Wi-Fi, the Wi-Fi password, the Wi-Fi network is Embassy Guest, and the password is Digital Italy 1, all lowercase. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and introduce our first panelist here. Sarah Frostenson, who's a graphics reporter at Vox Media. How many folks go to Vox regularly for their news? Great, so you've already got some great supporters here. So Sarah, you're fairly new at Vox, but you work on crafting compelling stories with both code and words. Prior to this, you worked at Gannett as a developer, and then also at the Chronicle of Higher Education and Philanthropy. I know last week you were working very hard on creating data visualizations for the Republican debate, which must have been interesting. Okay, so Sarah, I'm going to go ahead and let you introduce yourself and tell us a little bit more about your background.
Sure. Hi, so I'm Sarah, and I am a developer and journalist, most recently at Vox.com. I have experience primarily in mapping and then building out various visualizations, whether that's a database or a type of interactive chart. And as a journalist, I'm particularly interested in the intersection of storytelling that's data-driven, particularly within an international context. And yeah. That's me.
Great. Okay, so Heba. Heba is an Egyptian socialist, a social activist. Listen, I'm just reading. Heba, you are a social activist with a strong passion for democracy, human rights, development, and social change. Tonight, you're going to be speaking in your capacity as a State Department PFP fellow. And you've been working with us at TechChange on some really exciting projects, but tell us more about your background.
So I'm not going back to Egypt now. Yeah, my background is in social activism in Egypt. I've worked with a lot of local NGOs. I was part of the first e-education platform in Arabic in Egypt. It's called Heba Ghannam. Currently, I work for UNICEF in Cairo, and I'm on a few weeks program here with TechChange, so yeah.
And we're thrilled to have you.
Thank you.
Okay, next down the line, Sarah. Sarah, you are Director for Global Engagement at the National Security Council at the White House, also the Vice Chair of the Young Professionals in Foreign Policy. So Sarah, tell us a little bit more about yourself and your background.
Excellent. I think this is on. So I am at the White House now, but before that spent 5 years at the State Department with my good friend Suzanne. I'm so excited to see so many good State Department people here. But I work primarily on public diplomacy, which is what the U.S. government, just like this event at the Italian embassy, what the U.S. government does to engage with people and not government. So it's very important for us as we think about conversations that are happening around the world, tools that we can use to engage people on those conversations and not having sort of the typical non-data driven diplomacy, but really pushing data driven diplomacy to do aid better, to do engagement with people on the ground better, and really use it as a way to push foreign policy forward for the United States government.
Fantastic. And Suzanne, you are Director of Corporate Communication at Yahoo, but we first met when you were working as a Foreign Service Officer at State Department. Tell us a bit about that transition, and also, are you the first FSO to go from the service to Yahoo?
Decidedly not. I'm probably the one who did well, we'll comment on that after. Hey, everybody. Nick, thanks for having us here, and to all the TechChange crew, panelists. I may or may not be a socialist, but we'll leave that for Nick to decide later. So I am at Yahoo. I'm part of the corporate communications team based here in DC. Been there for about 2.5 years, and as Sarah said, used to be at the State Department for about 11 years. Number of faces in the audience that I see and love from the old days. Also worked in the public diplomacy space, and I think that so many of us in this room had the opportunity to kind of take digital engagement to the next level. So the first phase of that was sort of in the
mid 2000s when it was, shall we build a Facebook page? Oh my God, will we get arrested? Like, this is from an embassy perspective. And then it really came to, it's totally cool to do that. It actually gets you, it builds for you the opportunity to connect with people in different ways. And then, trying to explore along with TechChange, for example, how we could pursue that, from an education point of view, how we could connect with people and really deliver them the services that they need from digital, through digital means. So that intrigued me. After 11 years and a fascinating career at the State Department, I was really interested to get a perspective from the Valley itself, right? So to jump over to a tech company and kind of see how business decisions were made to engage exactly those kind of communities. Been a fascinating ride so far at Yahoo. And I think one thing that would be really relevant for this conversation are the kinds of voices and content that we see on Tumblr, which is our blog community, an incredible community for really rich content across languages, across borders, and really elevating sort of some of the most important issues of our day. So I look forward to the discussion.
Great, and great to have you here, Suzanne. Okay, Jen, you are the Senior Advisor to the U.S. Department of State's Office of E-Diplomacy, a career Foreign Service officer coming up on 19 years. That's really phenomenal. And you oversee creative efforts that include GIS team and a new tool to enhance diplomatic engagement called GovUp, which we're working with you on, which we're very excited about. You are also the person who told me I have to see Hamilton, the Broadway musical in New York, which is amazing if anybody else is interested in Broadway musicals. So, but Jen, tell us a bit more about yourself.
Well, I'm feeling like I'm the one who didn't escape from the State Department.
No, we need good people there.
I am in the Office of E-Diplomacy right now, which is an office set up in the Department of State to support the convergence of technology and diplomacy and help bring technology and technological tools to all facets of U.S. diplomatic engagement. So not just the public diplomacy aspect, but wherever else it can be helpful. We also have responsibility for knowledge management in the department and are doing a lot of work with open government and citizen engagement here in the United States, trying to support that. I think one of the reasons I'm in the office is because I do represent the demographic that is maybe not a digital native like some other people here, but more of the digital immigrants, because we have a lot of those people in positions of authority in the department who did not grow up using all the data that's available now and all the tools, and we need to help people to bridge that gap to make sure that we're as effective as we can be.
Great, and great to have you here as well. So now I'm going to invite our panelists to talk a bit more about some of their work at their respective organizations that relate to today's topic: mapping, data visualization, e-learning, and some of them have some visuals to share, which we'll pull up. So we're going to start I think with Sarah here and some of the work you're excited about at Vox.
Sure, sounds good.
And I think if we could also pull up the laptop slides too as we're doing this. Thanks.
So yeah, this first interactive is one that my coworker Kavya worked on, and what it was supposed to show is the GDP of the US and at certain points in time when other countries were more affluent. And it was just an example of taking a pretty data-heavy story and then visualizing it in a way where you can see it progressing from 1802 to the present day and showing how many countries are as rich now. And this is the kind of data-driven storytelling at Vox that I'm most excited to push forward. It's just taking a complex data set that could be a 500-word blog post and trying to make it more interactive and visual for the reader. Yeah, so that will play till the present day. And then the other project, this was outside of Vox, but one that I think is particularly relevant for this evening was the Refugee Project, which charts refugees from 1975 until the present day and the flows and migrations. And this was a project using a lot of UN data, but done independently outside of the UN structure, and just shows a way, I think, in which as data becomes more publicly available from various government agencies, there's just a lot for relationships between various tech companies and journalist organizations to really work both ways on presenting, visualizing, and showing data. And so with this particular interactive, if you were to hover over a bubble, it will show where refugees were dispersed and coming and going from, and if there was a particular conflict during that time. So, right. And this, I think, is a great example of mapping in digital diplomacy. That's something I've worked a lot with, primarily domestically, focusing on healthcare rates in the United States, but just trying to centralize that story geographically to you. And I think this is a great way to give a global perspective on a crisis.
And maybe say a bit more about that, Sarah. How does mapping deepen our personal understanding of the world, of issues that are important, and also improve diplomacy and relations between countries?
Sure. So I think mapping, for me, particularly when you're reading a story, and if it's not an area of the world in which you're familiar with, I think having a map, both that is explorative, but then also kind of a location map that can just situate you contextually as to where the story is unfolding. I think those are vital pieces. But then additionally, I think the Refugee Project is a great example too of expanding, taking it from a personal story to how it could impact governments, how you can visualize trends from across countries. And then particularly, I think you've seen this in the humanitarian sector when it comes to disaster relief, better coordination of efforts, particularly with earthquakes or tsunamis, to distribute emergency relief quicker and faster. And I think from a reporting standpoint, we always want to, have the accountability and due process afterwards to examine it. But I think there's a lot for all the key players to really benefit from.
And I know we're going to hear from Jennifer later about some of the work that foreignassistance.gov, fa.gov is doing to really track the aid disbursement and use maps to tell those narratives and stories. Heba, I think I'm going to go to you next and tell us a little bit about, you've done so much in your career, but the example that we were particularly excited about sharing was the work you did with Tahrir Academy. Tell us a bit more about that, the Khan Academy for Egypt and your role and how that transpired.
Yeah, so Tahrir Academy idea came actually from two places. The Khan Academy, that was the inspiring model for us, and it came also from Tahrir Square, right after the revolution in Egypt in 2011, where there was a huge problem with education and equal opportunity to good quality education. That was the real problem. And so we thought about how are we using the internet that has actually started a huge social and political movement into creating this equal opportunity of good quality education. And inspired by Khan Academy, we created Tahrir Academy. It was the first Arabic educational platform, e-education platform. It was dedicated to the 13 to 18 years old in Egypt. We were trying to create alternative curriculum to the traditional school curriculum based on critical thinking. I think it was revolutionary too. We worked a lot with the expats community, Egyptian expats community, like Egyptian Student Association in MIT and Harvard. So it was quite revolutionary to see that a postdoctoral fellow who is Egyptian in MIT giving a course to some 17 years old Egyptian in like deep south of Egypt. So this was actually happening, and the numbers were great. We had around 700,000 Facebook fan, and we had like 150,000 subscribers on YouTube learners, and it was growing so fast. And me personally, I went to a lot of conferences in Arab countries like Morocco, and we had girls coming from high school to meet us. Hi, we are using Tahrir Academy. So there is a huge need for e-learning in specifically in the Arab region.
And say a bit more. You think the Arab region is ready for e-learning? Are people excited about this?
Yeah.
And what are you seeing?
Yeah, the numbers is telling us that it's very ready. There's a huge need because the quality of education is not really where we want it to be, and the cost of education is very high. We are growing in numbers in a way that I don't know. The growth rate in Egypt is 2.2 now. So, and we're already 90 million people, and there's no actually more land to do more schools. So e-learning is a big potential, and and I was talking to Jennifer about actually that good quality. People cannot afford to go outside of Egypt that much on programs, so education could be, it's a huge potential. Yeah.
It's very exciting.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm going to now turn to Sarah. Sarah, many years ago, my dad was executive secretary of the NSC. His claim to fame was bringing email to the White House. So,
And that's where we stopped.
so I'm excited to hear from you. How are you using technology to enable diplomacy? I hope you're still using email.
We are.
But yeah, what are some of the things you're most excited about in your work that you would like to share with us?
So I feel a little bit like I shouldn't be up here. There's plenty of my colleagues from around the interagency here in the room tonight that are really doing amazing things. And at the NSC, I feel like it's our job to enable them to do those things. And so, you know, from my perspective, we are dealing in a world where everybody is becoming increasingly transparent, but everybody wants to be more private than ever from government. So you talk about mapping, you talk about data-driven diplomacy, you talk about, you know, how do we collect information to make our decision-making better, which is essentially what we do at the NSC, help the president make decisions. And how can we possibly do that without data? But nobody wants us to have their data, so we can't make a decision. So we're in this chicken and egg situation. So I think we need to increasingly partner with folks that are outside of government, but increasingly so outside the Beltway. I think there's a lot of folks that are inside the Beltway that are doing their thing and they like know how to work the government system, and that's great, but like we need bigger ideas than that. And we also need to use them to help us get our information better. So I look at organizations like Aid Data that's out of William and Mary that is doing incredible things. I mean, Vox, you guys do it great. There's so many people in this room that do it great. The problem is that there are not enough people in government that are looking at those sources. And so we need to like increase this wall is permeable and we need to make it to open the floodgates. So that's sort of my like general view on this. Some areas where I think that we're doing this a little pretty well is I think in our English language learning, I know my colleagues from the Bureaus of Educational and Cultural Affairs at the State Department have really put a premium on looking outside of government for ways to do English language. Everybody around the world wants to learn English language, even if they hate America. They want to learn English. And so, you know, how do we get that information to the masses? And just a couple of weeks ago, we had the best of the best from Silicon Valley to the White House who were doing English language learning, and they were doing incredible things. And so how do we take those platforms and get them out to the people that they don't, you know, I think we have this tech world that is scared of the international side, and we have the internationalists that are scared of the tech world. And what if we could all just work together and get this stuff out? So I've been really impressed with some of the work that they're doing. My colleagues in the International Information Program Bureau, we run a program called YALI, and this is the Young African Leaders Initiative, and they very smartly said, well, you're only taking 500 a year and you get 50,000 applications. What are you doing with the 49,500 that you aren't taking, and could we engage them? So that group has now grown to 150,000 people. And so we do emails out to them, we do Twitter chats, we ask them questions so that we can use their answers to make more educated policy decisions. And that seems very simple, and there's lots more complex technology that we could be using and we'd love to be using, but we have to partner with folks on the outside to do it. So I think my overall message is we're doing some, we need to do more, but we need partners that we know about and learn from to help us make those decisions better.
Great, and I think that actually takes us nicely to Suzanne. In many ways, you do tread both worlds. You have the State Department background, but now you're working for a Silicon Valley player. What are some of the things that you're doing at Yahoo that you're most excited about, and how are you bringing that State Department experience to bear on Yahoo's corporate, but maybe also diplomatic agenda?
Yeah. I get the great pleasure of being able to kind of pull from my State Department experience by working with our public policy team, both here in the US and around the world. And I wanted to just throw out a super light kind of topic that not just Yahoo, but I think across tech companies, social companies, we're really wrestling with this question hand in hand with the government and different actors across the government, not just here in the US, but again, around the world. And that is terror content online. So in a world where we share photos, where we share blogs, where we are actively out there capturing what we're seeing in the world and trying to broadcast that out to a broader audience, what crosses the line into the terror content space? And this is a very important question that a lot of people have a lot of opinions around. I will raise one example that everybody in this room will have heard of, but perhaps not know the depths of the sort of perspectives on it. So we all know the tragic image of that, I believe, 3-year-old Syrian boy who lost his life trying to cross the sea. And we have that image burned into us of his very small body in the sand after he passed away, capturing basically the plight of so many, obviously, who are trying to cross and make that journey and build a new life for their families. So that image, as we know, galvanized populations, here in DC, around this country, around the world, to contribute to some of the refugee organizations that have sprung up in Europe and really raised impressive donor dollars for those people. At the same time, we then saw, as many of you might know, that image then be co-opted by ISIS and galvanized to basically say, look, this is what happens if you try to leave. This is what will happen if you try to, get to the West. You are not wanted, and this is the fate that awaits you. And so how can you, and at that point, we others, again, in the tech space, were sort of asked, okay, this is now crossed into an image that is being leveraged by a known terror organization, and therefore it needs to be taken down. That raises incredible moral and ethical issues. So the same image that successfully raised, critically important dollars to keep people alive under the worst circumstances is then being used to recruit and to capitalize on a super nasty message. Where do we land as tech companies in that space? So I think that so often, where we're trying to come across as Yahoo, and I know many of the peer companies in the space, is on the side of freedom of expression, but with an eye to making sure that this is not content that's abusive or hateful in nature. That is a very gray line. So just to say, I think for the purposes of this discussion, I know you guys wanted to kind of take it to a new level. I think it's fantastic to use social net as exactly what it's for, is to, get, not only share what you're seeing and share what you're learning, but then, listen and hear back from a community that transcends the borders and the geography that you're in. You then run up, though, against some issues that aren't peachy all the time, right? So there's one that was a very recent one. So something on our minds.
Great. I think a very powerful example and some big questions around who gets to control those narratives. How do they, once they get released into the wild, many people can use them for many purposes. Jen, we're going to round out here with you. Tell us a bit about what e-diplomacy is up to at State Department, all the great things you're working on. I'm going to pull up your slides here.
Okay. Well, one of the things we do at e-diplomacy is I supervise a geographic information systems team, which I know probably doesn't sound revolutionary to a lot of you, but believe me, to the State Department, it kind of is. And so one of their first big efforts, which actually started before I arrived, was BIDS, which was done in partnership with the Bureau of Economic and Business Affairs to help collect information from economic officers and other officers overseas about potential projects for that U.S. businessmen could bid on with the U.S. business community and make more of that information available to the U.S. public in a timely fashion. So BIDS was one of the first tools to bring geographic data into the interagency for us. And so you can just keep going there, Nick. Just a couple of shots of BIDS to visualize where these projects are. They can be sorted by sector, et cetera, just to help people get that information. Find is coming soon. It's in a closed beta right now at the Department of State, but it's part of our collaboration with the Office of Foreign Assistance Resources. And will serve the interagency community as an aggregator for country performance data to help drive better decision-making when it comes to U.S. foreign assistance. And people are going to be able to draw in all these from these different publicly available data sources and create their own queries, choose how they want to do the visualization, etc. So Find is coming The Office of Foreign Assistance Resources has also recently relaunched foreignassistance.gov as part of the transparency effort to make it clear to the American public and others how US foreign assistance dollars are spent around the world. And they've made a tremendous amount of information available on country-specific and sector-specific, et cetera. But one of the things that they've realized is that making this data available is only really helpful if people understand what to do with it. And that is an issue both for our own personnel and for the folks in the countries in which we're working. And so, in order to help them bridge that gap, that's part of our partnership with TechChange. And we're launching a program called GovUp using the TechChange platform, where we'll be able to do some sustained diplomatic engagement and training while people are still at their own desks and not fighting, for instance, Cairo traffic. I mean, an afternoon meeting in Cairo can mean that that's all you do that day,
For your life.
because you will spend an hour and a half getting to it and an hour and a half getting back. And so we're trying to make it more feasible to learn how to deal with this data in an environment where it can be immediately employed into your daily workflow.
And I think what's particularly exciting about it is that you're bridging e-learning with data visualization and mapping in powerful ways. You're actually pulling together some of these threads and trying to engage people in multiple ways. Jen, anything else that you're excited about at State Department? I think, yeah.
You know, I want to get a plug in.
Yes.
Okay. I want to plug the Virtual Student Foreign Service, which has a lot of US citizen interns working for us in some of these activities and others. Our office runs the Virtual Student Foreign Service program, and we've now expanded to servicing 16 federal agencies, including NASA, the EPA, the Smithsonian Institution. And we've got over 700 US students right now engaged in 300 and some projects.
It's really amazing. I think a huge testament to what you're able to do, leveraging the power of the crowd to help with State Department work. Very exciting. And we're excited to be working with you too on GovUp. So
Yes.
thank you for mentioning that. So what I would like to do now, thank you to the wonderful panelists here for sharing a bit about their work. Before we break for questions, I would like to take 3 minutes and have each of you talk to the person next to you and mention one thing that you really are excited about here today, and it may be something we haven't mentioned yet that you're here coming with an idea, so forth. So take 3 minutes and both introduce yourself, and then we'll come back and take some questions. Okay?
Yeah, I know. I thought your point about increasingly people want the data, but they also don't want to give it up. I think that's great.
30 seconds.
Ready? Okay, so I'm gonna we'll take them in groups of 3, and I'm gonna do my best to direct traffic. So if you really want to answer something, I'm happy to.
Okay, folks. All right, we're going to get started again here. You can keep your conversations going over pizza later. All right. Y'all ready? Okay. All right. Good. So hopefully you've met a new friend now. So questions, please tell us who you are when you ask your question. Try and limit your question to 30 seconds and make sure they are actually questions. So those are the 3 rules. Everybody got them? Okay. So we will go ahead, and I think we've got a hand here, and then we'll have a microphone coming around as well. Great.
Hi, I'm Talia Salem. I work for Brand USA in content and social, so we work on a lot of these kind of issues. And I was just curious if you've tried to localize any of these products, or I see them in English, but if you've had any challenges kind of getting them in other languages or how it resonates in other countries.
Okay, great. Let's take 2 more. Right here, right behind you.
I work in the broadcast area and have done some public diplomacy work with media. I'm wondering if any of you use broadcasting, and specifically commercial and local television, as one of the tools when you're working internationally.
Great question. Okay, one more in this group, right here in the front.
I'm Andre, a good friend at the State Department, and was just wondering, with these new tools, the big advantage is the interactivity, the ability to engage. What are the challenges that you see for government or for your institutions to actually engage and not just have a one-way conversation, but to engage on the spot without getting clearances with regards to what you're trying to say?
Great. Okay, so 3 questions here. First one on how you all have gone about localizing projects, thinking about language. The second one, if you've incorporated TV or any broadcast journalism into your projects. And then third, this question of engagement. How do we make sure things are not just one directional with some of these new tools that we've got? Somebody like to maybe take the first question on language and localization? Heba, how about you? I'm going to put you on the spot.
I mean, I'm not really sure if I got the question, but let me rephrase, and if I don't get it, please correct me. We were talking about localizing the American programs in other local languages.
It can be any context, I think, thinking about your context as well. Is it all Arabic, or are you trying to find different forms of Arabic when you're doing Tahrir Academy?
Yeah, for the Heba Academy, it wasn't really challenging because Egyptian Arabic is like the most understood dialect of the Arabic language for all Arabic countries. And we used to work a little bit to do a bit of translation for Khan Academy content as well in Arabic. So it was key because, as you mentioned, like everyone wants to learn English, but it's not really the case. The English, the people who can actually speak English in Arab countries are not that many. And good quality education, we have to admit, it's only basically mainly in English in the world. So in order to actually take this step level of quality education, you have to localize it. You have to do it in your own language. So people would have this equal opportunity for education as you talked about.
Great. Question about broadcast TV. Does Vox do anything on the TV front? Maybe that's a...
Well, Vox does have its own video team, and they've actually done quite a bit of incorporating interactives within the actual video itself. So like I know when they had the conversation with President Obama, a lot of that then had charts or graphics behind him as he was talking. In terms of broadcast news, not specifically within content. I know though for Gannett, that was largely its model as it worked at local papers within the community, but then also with local broadcast TV stations. So I feel like that was a successful example of a larger media corporation being able to leverage breaking news in Texas and feature that on USA Today. And having that kind of network. But I think that's kind of a unique broadcast model within the Gannett properties.
I can go on that one too.
Yeah, Suzanne.
So from a Yahoo perspective, Yahoo News, Yahoo Sports, Yahoo Finance all leverage so much video just based on user demand. So many folks now of our billion users around the world, more than half of them, 600 million, are coming to us via mobile device. And the first thing they're going to click on very frequently is a video. So we're going to make sure to either lead with video content or make sure that, a text, news piece is flattered, if you will, by a video. And I'm sure a lot of you guys saw the plastering we just did around a Buffalo Bill Jaguars game that we just live streamed from London a couple weeks ago. So video is a huge investment space for us. And whether it's on the news front or on like live events front, that's kind of where you got to hit people these days. So it's an important space.
Great, and maybe either Jen or Sarah interested in speaking to the engagement question. How do we really truly use these tools, leverage these tools to get that two-directional conversation going between people who are helping and those who are maybe receiving aid?
Well, for instance, with the Find product, when that's available to the general public, people will be able to save their own queries and the data visualizations that they've created, and then that can be available for people on our side to draw upon and use. So that's one way that we can benefit from the engagement with the public.
Yeah, I mean, if I sat here and told you it was easy, I'd be lying. I mean, you talk about the clearance process. I think that there are a lot of people, especially younger people who are digital natives, that are extremely frustrated by sort of the bureaucracy that government puts around having a two-way conversation, because they realize, just like they engage with customer service Twitter handles, or they're doing it with their friends or whatever it is. I mean, you're only using social media effectively if you're having a conversation, and it's not one way. So I think that there are pockets where we can say, we've really done a good job of it. I don't think that we can say we check the box when we have the president or the vice president do a Twitter chat and therefore they're chatting with people in it's two ways. That's not really a conversation. I think we need to ingrain it much more in the work that we do. And part of that is just making sure people know where conversations are happening. We don't need to create our own conversations. We need to go and engage where conversations are already happening, which means that we need better training. We need people that are coming in from the outside who see these things and doing a tour through government and feeling like government service is part of what it means to be American or Italian or whatever country you live in, because if we just continue to operate in a bubble where we're constrained by rules, there's going to be nobody that helps us break those rules. So, I think it's really hard, and I think every time we have a win, like we do with our Yali network, or we do sometimes when we do emails from Secretary Kerry or whatever, we need to lift those wins up and say it's okay. And sometimes we're going to get answers that we don't like, and that's okay too. And we need to be honest about that. And I think that not only does that make us better policymakers, but it actually makes us more credible to our audiences that we engage with overseas.
Fantastic. I'm going to take a quick question from Twitter here. Leave Mark wants to know, can initiatives like Tahrir Academy be adapted to support e-learning and mobile learning tools for groups like Syrian refugees? I know that's a topic on a lot of people's minds. Are you seeing some interesting examples? Do you think what worked in Egypt could work in refugee camps, and maybe say a bit more about that?
Yeah, definitely. And this actually happened in like very few cases when we used to get, at the beginning of the crisis, it was still 2012. So we used to get a lot of emails from Syrian teachers saying that we're using your content. And again, because the dialect is very understood by the Syrian people, it was very easy to do this job while we're not actually doing it on purpose. So they were using a lot of our content. Now in Egypt, we have a huge population of Syrian refugees. They have their community schools working. They don't follow the Egyptian curriculum. They take those online content that we created, that other people as well are creating now, and they're using it in their community schools. So, so definitely it could be replicated, and maybe it doesn't need to be replicated. It could actually work on itself. It's just the idea of e-learning is to you create this the content and you leave it to the free will of the educator or the person learners.
Yeah, Sarah, go ahead.
Just to add, I mean, the State Department a couple of years ago started an incredible project on open educational resources and translating them into Arabic. That's just one example where it doesn't, I mean, Coursera and MOOCs, that's all great, and but that doesn't always work when you're in a refugee camp with no Wi-Fi, or you're not even a refugee, but you just don't have access. So what can we do to get teachers access and open up educational resources for people? Because it should be something that's just a human right.
I know that we're seeing a lot of really exciting examples of hybrid learning where people are leveraging the best content across the internet, and then also thinking about ways to create engagement in person in workshop type formats. So where there isn't internet available, there can still be some way to bridge both worlds, I think. Okay, why don't we take maybe 3 more questions from the audience? Question over here.
Hi, my name is Giselle, and I'm also from Brand USA. I manage media planning and advertising. I have a specific question in terms of the digital mapping and data visualization. Once these are created, how are you disseminating that information? What is the distribution strategy behind that? And once you get people to either that page or that site, how are you defining what success is?
Some great questions. Okay, let's take 2 more in this group. Over here? Yeah, in the end.
Hey, I'm Jared DeAngelis. I'm a technology consultant in DC. So technology is often referred to as a equalizer for people who don't necessarily have as big a voice as other folks. So not only on small scales, but also on large scales. So in terms of the relative power of maybe smaller states and larger states, what role do you see data playing in terms of shifting power balance in regions, that kind of thing? To what degree do you think that needs to be worried about? And on balance, do you think this is a positive influence? Do you think it's a stabilizing influence, or is it something that's more concerning?
It's a great question. Okay, 1 more. All right, right here, right next to.
My name's Dave Coe from Afro Nolan Foundation, and I had a question about foreignassistance.gov. Like, what's the point of it? Like, what's the purpose? I mean, because I guess I can understand that it's showing everyone where we're using the money, but to help whom? Like, I'm not.
Is there some, I'm going to throw that because I think there's probably someone from the Office of Foreign Assistance Resources here. No volunteers?
If there is, they're not raising their hand.
I assure you they were coming, and I hesitate a little bit to speak for them because my office is not a policy office, and there certainly is. But their site gives the explanation for why they invested in creating this. I think we all know that there may be some misperceptions in the American public, among other things, about how aid is spent. This is and how much foreign assistance the U.S. contributes every year. Also, I think that it was a great effort to use the data for better decision-making, to see where things were working, what types of things were working, what was not working and needed to be cut off, but to help people have access to that information that the U.S. government is already collecting, that the U.S. taxpayers are paid for. So.
Great. And then I just wanted to echo that other question we had. How do you all disseminate information around the mapping projects, the data visualization projects, and then how do you define success? And then the second question was, tech is a great equalizer. Smaller states and larger states are both advocating for more data, more open data. Does that change the power structure, the power balance as we look out over the global landscape? And if so, is that a good thing? So two questions, but maybe we start with disseminating. Maybe Sarah, I might turn to you first on this one.
That's probably the area I'd have the most expertise with. So largely analytics, right? So we're all familiar with the term of page views, but then within an individual interactive, I can track the way a user uses it. So I can see, oh, are they actually using the filter functionality? Are they going to use the search text box I gave them? What are their search results? So it's that kind of built-in analytics that I think really is the most important feedback I get as a developer to know, oh, that was successful, or no, that wasn't successful. Users aren't looking for that. Surprising things have been when I've built maps and instead of going to see the map being geolocated to your area, they prefer to scroll and pan within the map and discover counties on their own. That wasn't something I had expected in terms of user behavior. And then in terms of dissemination, I mean, that kind of widely varies depending on like what your platform is. You could be pushing content to something like Tumblr. You could be pushing content to a website. You could be pushing content as a GIF. There's just lots of different ways in which you can take a visualization to share that with people. But analytics, I think, are the best way to understand how your users are using it. And then one thing Vox does really well is trying to push evergreen content. So as opposed to writing a new story on gun violence in America, it will update an existing story and continue to add content to it.
Great. And Suzanne, anything to add on the dissemination or how you define success with any of Yahoo's platforms, products?
I mean, I think Sarah actually nailed it, so I don't have a lot to add, but I think for us, really, it's about taking a global approach. You know, okay, here are the channels that are available to us, but then really localizing too. You can't just cookie cutter how you're going to be looking at it. You've got to leverage all the analytics you got. So I think you absolutely nailed it, and it's global meets local in terms of really blanketing everything you can. And
Great.
we're not afraid to also use Facebook and Instagram to do that.
Great. And then the question about open data and how it might change the power balance. Is that an NSC question? I don't know.
I will take your question and I will ask our Egyptian friend how she, no, I'm actually very serious. I mean, I think that the American answer is yes. But if you ask some, I mean, what do you think? Are you happy that data has equalized? And is this a short term? Is this a long term? You're going to get a different answer no matter what country you ask. So,
actually, yeah, it is. It's changing the power struggle definitely, and I don't know. I'm really not sure about how. But the having open data and having this I don't know, it gave a voice out of it took the voice out of the government and maybe gave it to us a little bit more, which changed the power dynamics. And so, yeah, I'm happy.
It worked. Excellent. I mean, I not to be flippant about that, but I did really want to hear from her because I think it's something that we, here in the United States, in the United States government, we think transparency is excellent, and we try and figure out ways every single day to be more transparent, and that is great and it works in our cultural context, but I think we often don't realize the effects it will have in a different cultural context. Even if we continue with that policy path, I think we need to be very cognizant of the type of effects that we're going to have. But I also think that we need to continuously do a good job of being a leader in this area. So one thing I just learned about the other week was, I'm sure many people in this room know about it, but on whitehouse.gov, if enough people write in for a certain petition issue, I actually have to reply to it. So I get a nice little email from our folks in the Office of Digital Strategy, and they say, your issue has met the threshold. You need to reply to this petition, which is, that's a two-way conversation. And so if we can get stories like that out and show how it can actually be very powerful, then you take governments that are a little bit more weary, and you can say, this actually works for us. So it's not going to be perfect all the time, and I don't mean to be Pollyanna about it, but so I think that we need to understand cultural context, but we also need to lead by example.
Yeah, I think if I may add that if I was speaking for the Egyptian government, what my answer would be so different. But we were talking in while the audience were talking that me as a Department of State fellow from Egypt, it's your right to actually know what are my achievements as you need to measure your impact. But this could actually compromise my safety and security given the political context in Egypt now. So it's very tricky. I don't have any answer. Google knows everything about me, but I'm not sure if you should.
Well, right, and this is what I was saying before. She's perfectly fine giving her credit card information for the shoes she's going to buy tomorrow and put it on Facebook where she is. But if I know that as the U.S. government, suddenly that's not okay. So I think we need to figure out ways to make that work, and part of it is credibility question.
Great. Well, I know we're getting very close to pizza time here. So maybe I will stop there and then thank the wonderful panel here for their great thoughts. Suzanne,
Guys, I just want to thank Nick and TechChange for putting together an all-chick panel. This is totally rad.
Glad you could make it, and a big thank you again to the embassy and Andrea and others for agreeing to host. This is the coolest venue in DC. I think we can all agree. So with that, we will adjourn. Thank you.
You're awesome. And you're awesome. And you're awesome. It was really a pleasure. Thanks, dude.
Hey, listen, you all did wonderful. You did fun.
Yeah, what an amazing experience you had. It's really a pleasure to hear about it.